My name is Nam, and I was 22 when I first set foot in Bình Thạnh, a bustling district of Ho Chi Minh City. I had come from Cần Thơ, seeking a brighter future by enrolling in a graduate program at a local university. With limited savings and no family in the city, I scrambled to find an affordable place to stay. Online listings were either too expensive or too far from campus. Then a college acquaintance, Tan, mentioned a building that offered cheap month-to-month rooms in the Tan Song area. "It's near the water," Tan said. "The building is old but the rent is low." Eager to reduce my expenses, I decided to check it out. The idea of an old boarding house didn't faze me. My main priority was saving money for tuition. When I arrived, I found the building wedged between a small alley of repair shops and a stretch of open karaoke parlors near the main road. Paint peeled from the walls, and a dim neon sign flickered overhead reading "Phuc Loi Lodging." The landlord, Mr. Bao, was a middle-aged man with restless eyes who spoke in a subdued tone, showing me a vacant room on the second floor. It was labeled Room 206. The space was minimal: chipped tiles, a single window facing the alley, and a tiny bathroom whose sink was cracked. The corridor outside smelled faintly of damp. Yet the price was unbelievably cheap, less than half the going rate for Bình Thạnh. A part of me hesitated, but Mr. Bao insisted I decide quickly or risk losing it. Pressured by time, I signed the lease, paying a deposit that drained most of my wallet. That night, I gazed at the battered walls, mentally planning how to arrange my meager belongings. The building's hush felt oddly thick, as though the corridors breathed. Trying to hush my doubts, I reminded myself, it's only for a few months, until I find a better job. Little did I know I was stepping into an unseen snare, one that would taint every hour spent within those grimy walls. Over the first week, as I settled in, I learned bits and pieces about Phuc Loi Lodging. The first floor housed 3 karaoke parlors up front, each sporting loud neon signs. Behind them, at the rear of the ground level, was the landlord's living quarters. The second and third floors contained a series of rooms, some with permanent tenants, others short-term renters. Yet I rarely saw them. The hallways were eerily silent day and night. One neighbor, Mr. Hung, an older occupant in room 208, was friendly enough to chat with me. He mentioned that many people came and went from this building quickly, though he never elaborated why. When I pried further, he only shrugged. Some folks find the place uncomfortable. Others avoided conversation altogether or gave me a polite nod while hurrying past. I also noticed some unoccupied rooms with signs that read available, but still had their doors locked from the outside. Why not open them for new tenants? The landlord gave vague answers when I asked, claiming renovations were pending. But the building looked neglected, with peeling paint, poorly lit corridors, and a pervasive sense of stale air. My classes at the university began, and I juggled hours of study with the stress of living in unfamiliar conditions. At first, nothing blatantly supernatural occurred. The occasional flicker in the corridor lights or random scuttling noises could be dismissed as building quirks. But I couldn't ignore a subtle tension coiling in my stomach, an unshakable sense that I was being watched. The occupant's gaze might follow me from a cracked door or a corner of the stairwell, though I never saw who or what exactly. Little by little, I heard rumors. A prior occupant had died in suspicious circumstances, or someone had reported ghostly moans at night. But rumors swirl in any old building. I tried focusing on my studies, attributing the gossip to bored tenants. Still, a seed of fear took root deep inside me. About 2 weeks in, the nights grew restless. My room, though simple, felt suffocating after dark. The single overhead light cast harsh shadows on the cracked walls. I'd flick it off around midnight to sleep, only to jolt awake hours later for reasons unknown. My heart would pound as I lay in near total darkness, straining to hear faint sounds from beyond my door, a soft knocking or shuffle. Usually, it was too quick to confirm. One night, around 2 a.m., I stirred from sleep to a distinct sound, footsteps in the corridor, stopping outside my door. My heart hammered as I waited. Then a single rap on the door, knock. I froze, uncertain whether to respond. Another knock came, more insistent. I mustered courage to speak. Hello. No reply. Gathering nerve, I switched on the light and approached the door. Peeking through the tiny peephole, I saw only darkness in the corridor. Could it be a neighbor messing around, or a random visitor from the karaoke parlors downstairs? After a minute, I opened the door slightly. The corridor was empty. My stomach knotted. I locked up again, returning to bed. But sleep never fully returned that night, my mind racing with possible explanations. The next morning, I brushed aside the incident, determined not to let paranoia take hold. I joked with Mr. Hung about potential ghostly visitors, but he only gave a forced laugh, eyes shifting nervously. By that afternoon, I was buried in university assignments, half convincing myself it was nothing but a night hallucination. But from that point on, more subtle events occurred. My desk chair sometimes moved a few inches from where I'd left it. The bathroom faucet dripped at random intervals, even though I turned it tight. Strangest of all, I found a series of small footprints, water footprints, leading from the bathroom to the center of the room one evening, though I'd showered hours prior and dried the floor. My rational mind floundered for explanations. By the third week, the landlord introduced a new tenant to share room 206, Kwong, a cousin of Mr. Bao who needed a cheap place as well. I wasn't thrilled about losing the privacy of a single-occupant room, but the landlord insisted Kwong would only occupy a small corner. He claimed it would reduce my portion of rent, an appealing compromise given my limited funds. Kwong, about my age, was a quiet but polite man from Quang Nai. He'd moved south for construction work. At first, I welcomed the company. At least with another occupant, the weird night noises might be less frightening, I told myself. Kwong, however, after just a day, started mentioning odd feelings about the building. He said the corridor at night gave him chills, and once he'd heard a moan near the stairwell. One evening, not long after Kwong moved in, I studied by lamplight while he dozed on his mat. Suddenly, he jolted upright with a strangled yell, eyes wide in terror. I rushed to his side, asking what happened. He stammered that he dreamt of a shadow figure stooped at the foot of his bed, face half hidden in gloom, reaching for him with elongated arms. That might just be a nightmare, I tried to console. But Kwong insisted it felt unervingly real, as if someone physically grabbed his legs. His expression rattled me. We checked the door, locked. The windows, latched. My mind flickered to the previous knocks at midnight. Could some intangible presence be messing with us? We agreed to keep the lights on at night. I told myself, it's only an old building. Possibly we're all just jumpy. But the tension only grew. If this was only the beginning, how much worse could it get? One weekend, I had a heavy workload of assignments, so I spent most of Saturday in the room. Kwong had gone out for his job. By late afternoon, the building was eerily quiet. Outside, the alley bustled with motorbikes. The karaoke parlors downstairs hadn't opened for the evening yet. While typing on my laptop, I heard the corridor's overhead light buzzing, a sign it might soon burn out. Then a soft knocking on the door startled me. I called, "Who is it?" No reply. My chest constricted. Another knock. Heart pounding, I flung the door open, expecting a prank. The corridor was deserted. I felt that intangible sense of being observed, like eyes following from behind. The hair on my neck prickled. I glanced down the hallway. The overhead bulbs flickered, revealing not a soul. When I retreated back inside, I froze. My bed was parted from the wall a good foot, as if forcibly dragged. My chair teetered at a strange angle. A bolt of fear lanced me. I'd only stepped out for seconds. No intruder could have done that so silently. I dashed to the door, peering outside again, still no sign of anyone. I realized I was trembling. Some invisible force was toying with me. After pushing the furniture back in place, I rushed to a small corner altar I'd set up with a Buddhist figurine, lighting an incense stick. My mother had taught me that sometimes praying could calm a malicious presence. The smoky tendrils curled in the stuffy air. My mind reeled with a single question: what is haunting this room? That evening, Kwong returned. He found me on edge, rummaging for any symbolic protection, like old charms my grandmother once gave. He raised an eyebrow. Something else happened, right? I recounted the bizarre incident. Kwong's eyes darkened. I had a weird conversation with a man from the second floor too, he said. He claimed someone died in room 206 a few years back, a self-inflicted tragedy. The building hushes it up. The rumor triggered alarm bells. I pressed Kwong for details. He said the man believed a previous occupant, a lone female student, had spiraled into depression. Found unconscious in the very corner where my bed now stood. She died in the hospital soon after. The landlord, Mr. Bao, never publicly admitted it, but apparently the occupant left behind some heartbreak or unresolved trauma. Could that be the cause of these apparitions? We confronted Mr. Bao the next day, demanding clarity. He refused to discuss it, only offering a half-hearted, "That's just gossip. Don't indulge in rumors." But I saw panic flicker in his eyes. He all but confirmed something tragic had happened. With the truth nearly exposed, we realized that ignoring the haunting was no longer an option. At dusk, a slip of paper was shoved under my door. It read, in shaky writing, "Move out. This place is cursed." My heart pounded. Was it from the same mysterious neighbor or another tenant? Kwong read it grimly, saying, "We need to get out. Or we fix this somehow." Our finances pinned us in place for the moment, so we decided to endure a bit longer while searching for a new lodging. We had no idea how risky that delay would be. A few nights later, the corridor's overhead light flickered for the last time, then died altogether, leaving only the faint glow from the alley's neon signs through the dusty windows. The place felt claustrophobic. Kwong and I sat in the room, lamp on, discussing our next steps. If we fled, we'd lose our deposit. If we stayed, who knew what might unfold? Around midnight, we tried to sleep, lights off, trusting we could handle minor disturbances. That was a mistake. An ominous chill gripped the air. I half-dozed, only to wake to Kwong's shrill shriek. My eyes snapped open, finding him pinned to the bed, arms splayed, mouth trembling in terror. A shadowy figure hovered above him, features obscured, but the silhouette of a female face was visible, a curtain of hair swaying. She seemed to press down on Kwong's chest, her intangible weight choking him. "Stop!" I yelled, stumbling from my mattress. I lunged to push the entity away. My hand passed through cold emptiness. The presence hissed, turning its unseen eyes on me. I glimpsed a fleeting impression of a pale face twisted in anguish. Then, in an abrupt swirl, it receded from Kwong, vanishing into the corner near the bathroom. Kwong gasped for air, chest heaving. "She tried to drag me away," he choked out, tears streaming. We flicked on the overhead light, hearts hammering. My mind reeled from the direct confrontation. This was no mild haunting. The ghost assaulted Kwong physically. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, lamp blazing, kneeling by the small Buddhist figurine in silent pleas for help. Dawn found us both drained, terrified. That morning, we planned to exit the building for good, deposit be damned. But ironically, my monthly scholarship arrived late, and Kwong's wages were delayed. We needed a few more days to gather resources and find a different lodging. We were trapped for the short term, forced to endure nights of dread. Seeking solutions, we turned to an elderly caretaker named Aunt Hien, who lived on the ground floor and had worked in the building for decades. She admitted quietly that room 206 had a grim history. Years ago, a young woman named Tui lived there while studying at a nearby college. She was found unconscious after a rumored heartbreak or depression, never regaining consciousness. Some believed her sorrow-laden spirit remained. We asked Aunt Hien for spiritual advice. She suggested a basic ritual: place offerings of fruit and flowers on an improvised altar in the corridor, light incense, and pray for Tui's soul to rest. We complied, hoping it might calm the haunting. That evening, we set up a low table in front of room 206, arranged white flowers and a small plate of fruit, lit incense. We prayed softly for Tui's peace. The corridor's dimness lent a solemn atmosphere, the scent of joss smoke swirling. At first, it seemed to help. The next 2 nights remained quiet, no knocks, no sightings. Kwong and I cautiously relaxed, thinking the spirit was appeased. But we discovered it was only a lull before the storm. On the 3rd night post-offering, we both turned in early, drained from classes and work. We left a small candle lit near the fruit plate, though the incense had long since burned away. Perhaps we assumed the spirit would not disturb us again if we showed respect. Somewhere past midnight, an unholy crash shook the entire room. My eyes snapped open, heart racing. The overhead bulb flickered, as if fighting a power surge. Kwong bolted upright beside me, fear contorting his face. Outside, the corridor resounded with cascading metal, like a large iron shelf collapsing. We rushed out, discovering the low table we'd used for offerings toppled, fruit scattered, the candle smashed. The corridor smelled rancid, like rotting flowers. As we stood there, The door to a vacant room at the corridor's end slammed open. A shape lunged out, a female figure in a tattered dress, hair matted, face contorted. She let out a guttural wail, spine bent at an impossible angle. My entire body froze. Kwong yelped in horror. The apparition locked eyes on him, though her black pupils seemed bottomless. She advanced with jerky motions, arms outstretched, fingernails scraping the tile. I fumbled backward, yelling for help. A dull terror pinned me. The caretaker was nowhere to be found. The hallway reeked of stale perfume and something far fouler. The figure closed in on Kwong, who sank to his knees, wailing. "Stay back!" I cried, arms shaking. In a flicker of corridor light, I saw her face clearly. Tears of black fluid streaked her cheeks, lips twisted in a half-snarl, half-lament. She took Kwong by the shoulder, intangible fingers sinking into his flesh. He shrieked, body convulsing. My mind reeled, adrenaline surging. I seized a broom from the corner, slashing it through the spirit's silhouette. It passed harmlessly, but the entity screeched, swirling into intangible ribbons, dissolving into the flickering shadows as if scattered by the attempt. Kwong collapsed, panting, sweat-soaked. We stared, trembling violently. The corridor's air felt thick with despair. No illusions now. This spirit possessed real malevolence or heartbreak, physically assaulting him. Our meager offering was insufficient. At dawn, we realized staying even another night was suicidal. We confronted Mr. Bao, demanding an explanation or a solution. Exasperated, he confessed that the building's top floor had once been used as a boarding house for hostess employees of the karaoke parlors below. Some tragedy struck, culminating in a girl's death in room 206. I told no one. Sorry, he said, eyes downcast. We demanded a spiritual purge. If he refused, we'd flee, deposit or not. Faced with the possibility of a scandal, Mr. Bao contacted Master Tom, a known local medium rumored to handle severe hauntings. By midday, Master Tom arrived, a stern-faced woman in her 50s. She insisted on seeing room 206 immediately. Inside, she traced her fingers along the walls, occasionally wincing as if feeling waves of torment. "This presence is strong," she murmured. "She is consumed by heartbreak and sorrow, tethered here by unfulfilled longing." That evening, Master Tom prepared a full cleansing ritual. She set up an altar in the corridor outside our room, featuring incense bowls, chanting scripts, a small mirror and joss paper. She instructed Kwong and me to stand behind her, each holding a bundle of herbs. The other tenants, rattled by the fiasco, lingered at a distance. Mr. Bao hovered, wringing his hands, dreading further uproar. Around 11 p.m., the ritual began. Master Tom chanted archaic verses. The corridor lights dimmed. A swirl of cold air enveloped us. The presence thickened. My chest pounded with dread, remembering how violently the ghost had attacked Kwong the previous night. Mid-ritual, Master Tom brandished a small bell and a reflective disc, calling upon the spirit to appear. The corridor temperature dropped abruptly. A hush fell, as if all outside traffic vanished. Then, from the gloom near the door to room 206, she materialized again, the same spectral figure in tattered pinkish attire, hair partially concealing a twisted face. Kwong whimpered, stepping back. Master Tom held her ground, chanting louder. The spirit's black eyes roamed the gathered group, seething with sorrowful rage. She hissed, half lunging forward. Master Tom raised the mirror, reciting an invocation to guide the soul to rest. The ghost let out a shrill cry that rattled the corridor's cheap plaster walls. Light bulbs flickered. My heart hammered like a drum. The spirit's form wavered, as though at war with the ritual's force. In a fluid motion, the ghost soared forward, intangible arms outstretched to Master Tom. The medium responded by flinging a handful of salt-infused rice in the spirit's path. The figure recoiled, keening in pain or fury. The wind whipped around us, extinguishing half the candles. Time seemed to slow as the ghost locked her hollow gaze on Kwong, beckoning him once more. He swayed, nearly stepping into her intangible hold. I lunged to grip his arm, pulling him back. "No!" I shouted. Tears stung my eyes. The sense of her heartbreak battered my mind, a wave of sorrow so intense it threatened to drown me. Yet Master Tom persisted, chanting a final incantation that ended in an anguished crescendo. The spirit let out a deafening wail, hair flailing, as if grappling with an invisible chain. Then her form broke apart into swirling shreds of black mist that dissolved into the corridor's stuttering light. Zilengse. The corridor's overhead bulb stabilized, revealing no trace of the ghost. Master Tom panted, sweat glistening. Kwang collapsed to his knees, sobbing. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by stale but normal air. We realized with trembling relief that the spirit's presence had vanished. The next morning, Master Tom explained that the ghost was indeed the lingering soul of Twee, the ill-fated occupant who died from heartbreak or self-harm. She had grown resentful and attached to living tenants, particularly Kwang, channeling her longing through him. The final ritual severed that bond. Master Tom advised that the landlord set up a small memorial or offering for her soul, so she could find peace. We wasted no time. By midday, Kwang and I packed our belongings. The relief was palpable, overshadowing the forfeit of any deposit. Mr. Bao, clearly chastened, apologized repeatedly. He promised to build a small altar for Twee, hoping the building would cease to be a den of restless spirits. Walking out the door, with suitcases in hand, I exhaled in relief. The memory of Twee's sorrowful face lingered in my mind, tinged with pity for her tragic end. Kwang thanked me for saving him, though I felt no triumph, just exhaustion. Together, we stepped onto the busy main road, buses and motorbikes swirling around us. The humid city air felt strangely freeing after the building's suffocating gloom. In the following days, we found a new lodging near the campus, pricier but blessedly ordinary. Kwang recovered slowly from nightmares. He remained quiet, sometimes lost in thought. We never forgot the haunting in that cramped, decaying corridor. My nights still echoed with the sound of invisible footsteps and intangible whispers. Yet each day, the memory receded, replaced by the mundane tasks of class and work. Months later, I heard rumors that Mr. Bao sold the building, and a new owner planned a complete renovation. Whether Twee's spirit finally found rest or the new walls simply entombed her sorrow, I can't say. For me, the experience stands as a chilling lesson. Sometimes the cheapest rent in Benton can come at a hidden cost, a cost of shadowy nights, terror, and the echoes of a soul's heartbreak reaching from beyond the grave.